Good morning. This is Elliot Harris in New York. Can anyone see me or hear me in Nairobi?
Hi, Elliot. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Could you turn your webcam on so that we can see you?
Okay, let's see why that is not working. Oh, no, that's not right.
Just share your webcam.
I'm not seeing where that would be. I have a control panel here for the audio
Yes, there's that
and
part.
chat.
You can see the icon for video.
No, I can't. I see the microphone.
Yes, then after the microphone, there's the screen, and then there's the third one is webcam. There's audio, there's that for screen, and then webcam.
I see the toggle between full screen and... Let's see now. And this would be on the GoToMeeting. This is very... I'm not finding it. Let's see, webcam.
Okay.
Can you see? No? Can you see me yet?
Not yet. So you're logged in a laptop?
I'm at my laptop here at my home, yes. And everything seems to be fine. I just don't see I do not see well, I see an icon for webcam up on the top of the screen.
Yes.
And I click it, but it says top.
Do you have a webcam on the laptop?
Yes, I do. I usually do. I don't know why it's not on. It's very strange. Okay, let's see. Webcams. No, I don't see it. I see at the top of the screen on the menu line it says webcams. I open that. It shows me where the webcam is positioned, but it doesn't say anything about turning it on or off.
Do you have a TeamViewer? Maybe I can troubleshoot for you.
No, I don't. No. Oh, this is annoying. I have the control bar which shows the audio and it shows chat, but it doesn't show anything about webcams.
So are you able to see my screen? Because if you can see my screen, then you can see where I'm pointing the mouse. You should look for that icon.
No, what I see is the it's a web page, Committee of Permanent Representatives, and it's scrolling through UN Environment. Right now it has UNEA and so on and so forth, and a series of photographs scrolling on the bottom. This is very strange.
Yes.
Hi, Elliot. This is Julia.
Hello. Hi, Julia.
You will be the first, okay?
Right. We're still trying to figure out how I can get my
Don't worry.
camera to work.
Important is that you can talk, so
Yes,
listen.
very good.
If we can, we're sorry that we can't see you, but that's life and technology.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
All right, very good.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's not integrating. The- I left it on my desk. Who is the You have his number? Yeah. You have his number? Oh. Good morning, Samantha.
Hi, good morning.
So you can hear as well?
Yes,
Yes,
I
I
can. This is
can.
Elliot. I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
I
can.
can, yeah.
And Dorcas, can you hear us?
I hear
Yes,
you just fine, yes.
I hear. I can hear you.
All right, thank you. Stay connected.
Okay.
Dorcas, Samantha, this one is from Mega Books. So, but I'm bringing the list now.
Yes. Since we're on GPT, if you they have sent me one, but they just told me that there is a new one that they would like to. But let me proceed.
Hi, Elliot.
Hi there.
So, if you had maybe TeamViewer, I could help you troubleshoot the problem.
What is the name of that? Tim?
TeamViewer. Let me just text you the name. You can
Okay.
download TeamViewer, then
TIN viewer?
yeah, just check the chat.
Team viewer, okay.
Yes.
So that's a what? I'll go on to see if I can find that. So download Team Viewer.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I can do that.
Version 12 point, like the one I'm downloading.
Okay, it's downloading it now. Okay, double click the icon. Okay, I've just downloaded it. Okay, what do you need from me now? I have it there.
Hi, Elliot.
Can you hear me? I have downloaded the team viewer, and it has this control screen up. How can I set it up so that you can?
Yeah, very clear. But
Victor, I have the team viewer installed.
you installed it?
I have installed it. It has a screen now, a remote control meeting, and it has my ID number and a password.
But I want to talk to him.
Yes.
The MacLab's presentation.
So I bet that's right. No, it's safer. If I can check through and mine is down. It's like a
So what we are expecting today is update here. But what's going on here is if you can elaborate a little bit what religion
This one?
yeah. You've seen the big paper that we did, like a synthesis paper. I guess they want to hear you put some, you can start with this one.
Typically is what I'm receiving.
You've seen this paper, yeah.
Okay, yeah, they're the two. So I didn't, I don't know.
I'll give it to you so that you can read it while we do
Yes,
Could you tell us which one?
yes,
The left one?
rather than review that one. Great. And then it means you've got it in your folder, it means you can see those things. So it's just a complete one.
So you always send after me.
Exactly.
That will be the only one presentation.
Oh.
This one.
All right.
Elliot, have you received to put in yet?
Yeah, he's connected, but
take your seats, please? Good morning and welcome to another subcommittee meeting. You have seen the agenda. I would have a very quick amendment to it. As Elliot Harris in New York is online and it's after midnight there, I would suggest to take him first and to hear his update on EMG, if you agree, with this amendment of the provisional agenda. Gentlemen, please take your seats. Okay, thanks. Okay, so if you agree with this amendment, I would propose to adopt today's agenda. So I hear no objection. The agenda is adopted. So first, I would like to greet Elliot Harris, who is in New York online. We will have his voice, not his face, today because he couldn't connect to the webcam. Elliot, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning. I hear you fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, Elliot, if you can start your update because it's late in New York. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon or good morning to all of the delegates of the CPR. My name is Elliot Harris. I'm the Assistant Secretary General and head of the New York office. I'm also head of the Secretariat of the Environment Management Group, and my briefing today pertains to an update on the work of the UN Environment Management Group. The UNEA Assembly Resolution 2/5, entitled Delivering on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, requested, among others, the Executive Director of UN Environment to report to the Assembly at its next session on progress in implementing the system-wide framework of strategies on the environment, as well as the report on maximizing the effectiveness of the Environment Management Group in the light of the 2030 Agenda. This briefing this morning on progress made to date on those two items, as well as update you on some additional work that we're doing in dealing with EMG Nexus dialogues following a recent meeting that we undertook here in the Secretariat. First, to the system-wide framework of strategies on the environment. The system-wide framework is a collective framework to achieve greater synergy, collaboration and coherence in the UN system's work on the environment in support of member states in the delivery of the environmental dimension of the 2030 Agenda. The framework was prepared by the Environment Management Group, endorsed by the UN Chief Executive's Board for Coordination, the CEB, and launched at the second session of UNEA last year. Following UNEA Resolution 2.5, the Environment Management Group's senior officials at their 22nd annual meeting in September of last year considered the implementation of the framework through a consultative process, including the preparation of an annual synthesis report on the UN system contributions to the delivery of the environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals. The synthesis report will provide good examples of how UN entities are responding to the environmental dimensions, both individually and collectively. It will facilitate the sharing of information and good practices on existing interagency partnerships and collaborations, and it will also identify areas where there is room for improvement, room for strengthening or launching new collaboration on the environment. Currently, through a survey, UN agencies are providing inputs on issues that were agreed to under the SWFS. These inputs will be compiled and processed for consideration in the consultative process. As a result, the first annual synthesis report will be submitted to the 23rd Senior Officials Meeting in September 2017, and subsequently to the third session of UNEA in December 2017. There are some opportunities, but also some challenges associated with the process of preparing the system-wide framework of strategies. It provides a framework, as said, for following up on the environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals within the UN system. Over time, the framework can result in the identification of common strategies on the environment and partnerships for the effective use of resources and effective response. The synthesis report will document baseline results on which future reports under the SWFS can build, leaning as much as possible on what organizations are already doing in terms of reporting in relation to the 2030 agenda. The report will offer examples of internal strategies that agencies are using to align their environmental work with the Sustainable Development Goals. Also, it will offer examples of how the UN and stakeholders are collaborating on the environment and in specific areas of the Sustainable Development Goals, and areas where there are opportunities for scaling up and or strengthening the coordination in existing or in new areas, environmentally relevant areas of the Sustainable Development Goals. In addition to the synthesis report, collaboration under the system-wide framework of strategies may result in sharing data and information by the participating agencies on their activities and initiatives at the national, regional and global level in support of the 2030 agenda. In terms of challenges, maintaining the system-wide framework of strategy process and requesting the UN agencies to provide regular inputs is a challenge that requires regular contact and follow-up. Working under the SWFS should not be limited to a reporting exercise that adds yet another layer of reporting to the UN agencies. It should be a dynamic and useful process for the agencies themselves in which they benefit from collaboration by sharing and exchanging data, sharing resources, engaging in partnerships and gaining access to financial resources for implementing their respective environmental activities under the 2030 agenda. In terms of way forward, the implementation of the system-wide framework of strategies will form a significant part of the Environment Management Group's work in the period ahead. The focus will now be on collating and analyzing the inputs provided by agencies into a zero draft of the synthesis report for consideration by the consultative process at the latest by April of this year. An online portal hosting information gathered under the system-wide framework will be developed and linked to the EMG website. The second area I wanted to report on this morning is the follow-up work on the effort to maximize the effectiveness of the Environment Management Group in the context of the 2030 agenda. Again, following a resolution 2/5, through an interagency task team, a proposal is being considered by the EMG for the implementation of the EMG effectiveness report. This includes a revised terms of reference and rules of procedure for the EMG in the light of the 2030 agenda. The effectiveness report recognized opportunities to further maximize the effectiveness of the EMG's mandate, and it pointed to a possible need to consider a revisiting or a revision of the terms of reference in order for the EMG to be fit for purpose. A revision of the terms of reference has been proposed with the view of ensuring that it adequately reflects the EMG of today, the expectations of the EMG in the context of the 2030 agenda, as well as the changes and developments of the EMG since its terms of reference were originally approved in the year 2000. In terms of opportunities and challenges, the discussion on maximizing the effectiveness of the EMG has provided a useful opportunity for the group to renew itself and to reflect on how it can best add value and support its member agencies and ultimately the member states in the implementation of the environmental dimension of the 2030 agenda. The revised terms of reference will anchor the follow-up of the environmental dimension of the 2030 agenda to the core of the EMG's role and contributions in the future. It clarifies the EMG's relationship with other interagency mechanisms, improves the modalities of its work, and clarifies the role and contribution of its members, providing them with the opportunity to engage more actively in the work of the group. UN Environment remains as the lead agency in the EMG, shouldering the most crucial responsibility to catalyze coordination and collaboration within the Environment Management Group. UN Environment should encourage more ownership and participation by UN agencies in delivering on the environmental dimensions of the SDGs, and equally, it should enhance the environmental agenda by integrating the socio-economic dimensions in collaborating more with the UN agencies with expertise in those fields, with the support of the Environment Management Group as a whole. In terms of the way forward, a draft revised terms of reference and rules of procedure of the EMG will be considered by the Interagency Task Team in February this month, with a view to finalizing the draft for consideration by the senior officials at its meeting in September 2017. Let me turn now to the much newer work on the Nexus dialogues. Supporting the implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals is going to be the focus of the United Nations system over the next 14 years. Over the past decades, the UN system has developed a wealth of specialized technical, normative and operational capacity and services to support member states in specific aspects of sustainable development. However, the 2030 Agenda, with its integrated and indivisible nature, challenges the UN system agencies to ensure that their specialized policy, decision-making and response systems are all well-suited to uptake and all effectively support the integrated SDGs, including the environmental goals and targets. In the absence of innovative thinking and practice, the efforts and efficiency of the UN system in implementing the SDGs could be significantly lower than it might otherwise be. It's therefore crucial to identify ways to increase coherence, enhance synergies in governance and policy planning, put in place effective institutional architecture and decision-making processes, and to scale up financing and partnerships. In this context, the senior officials of the EMG at their 22nd meeting in 2016 called for regular and more frequent meetings of the EMG with a focus on UN system cooperation and collaboration around some of the nexus issues that are embedded in the 2030 Agenda itself. In response, the EMG Secretariat, in collaboration with the Stockholm Institute of Environment, plans to prepare and organize a series of policy dialogues on environmental nexus issues that are linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. The EMG dialogue series will contribute to the common understanding of the integrated goals and targets of the SDGs, as well as the requirements and opportunities these bring for the UN system and for its individual entities. The dialogues will also provide an occasion for UN entities and other stakeholders to identify areas of mutual interest and collaboration in achieving the SDGs in a coherent and collaborative manner. The Nexus approach brings attention to the intersections between different domains, and it offers a way to address complex problems. The essential task when tackling complex issues is to break them down into feasible components and address the components one by one. The temptation, and it is often a useful strategy, is to break the problems down along sectoral lines. However, when crucial decisions must be made at the nexus between sectors, with effects that spill over across sectoral boundaries, this approach, the sector approach, does create risk. The sector experts know their own areas, but very few of them are experts on the overlaps between the fields. The Nexus approach, by contrast, focuses the attention on the overlaps themselves, the overlaps between the sectors, even as it respects the benefits of sectoral expertise. The purpose is a practical one. It's to make better plans through an understanding of the interactions between the spillovers, between the sectors and the spillovers that go between the sectors. The proposed series of dialogues will offer techniques to think critically about nexus issues between any two or more domains. But given the mission of the EMG, the particular focus will be placed on integrating the environmental dimension into plans that address the implementation of the SDGs. The current status is that a concept note is being finalized which provides content, form, and a plan for organizing a series of EMG policy dialogues in 2017 on a set of nexus issues that are related to the environmental dimensions of the SDGs. It's anticipated to organize 4 Nexus dialogues in 2017 on the margins of major intergovernmental meetings that are relevant to the SDGs. These could include the World Health Assembly, High-Level Political Forum, and the UN Environment Assembly. The dialogues will convene representatives of UN agencies, member states, and other stakeholders, and they may consist of technical and policy level statements. There is one further aspect of the work of the EMG that is new and has just recently been launched, and that is an issue management group on the question of managing electronic waste within the UN system. This work is being currently led by the UN University, which is undertaking a survey of current practices within the system on the management of e-waste. Once that inventory of practices has been done, the issues management group will then move forward to understanding how best practices can be identified and sharing recommendations for the system as a whole as the most appropriate and effective and efficient management of electronic waste within the system. The other issues management groups continue their work as we had reported on the last occasion. With that, I'll stop, and I'm very happy to answer any questions providing further information as may be required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elliot, for your update on the system-wide framework of strategies as well as the progress of the work of the Environmental Management Group. We are very happy to have direct connection with you because we consider that the UN office in New York has an extremely important role to play. I'm opening the floor if there are any questions for Elliot on his update. I will give the floor to the High Commissioner of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam. And thanks to Elliot for enlightening us in the, must be pretty late in New York right now. Now, my question is a practical one. How soon, or maybe that's not the right question, why is it taking so long to put together things? Because what we have in this report, I have it in front of me, about which we were being briefed. So we are talking about the nexus approach and the need to do this and concept papers and so on and so forth. And this was launched by the second UNEA. So can you please share with us what exactly is the hitch? Because so far you're telling us that we will have the nexus approach, then we will talk about the nexus approach, and then we'll have a concept note, and then we are finalizing it. And you have a rather relaxed schedule. Because here in Nairobi we are trying to create a sense of urgency in anticipation for UNEA 3 and trying to sort of impress upon at least each other that time is of the essence and we don't have the luxury to just keep on talking about these things. And when we are not even clear what we are going to talk about. And then you've spoken about decision making, and that again, even if you do manage to identify the overlaps at considerable expense, I must say, because these meetings obviously are not free, then again we will have the eternal problem of who calls the shots and who is going to decide things and so on and so forth. Does UN Environment have the competence, or should it be, go to the General Assembly and so on and so forth? So just, any practical hurdles that you are finding in your work so far, and perhaps how UN Environment can help you out in that. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Elliot, I will give the floor also to EU, and after that, if you can reply to the questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. The cat is away. I have a difficult task to jump as a mice on behalf of the EU today and present some EU views regarding the agenda points. First of all, thank you very much for Mr. Elliot Harris on the briefing. We believe that the UN Environment and EMG play a key role in strengthening the work of the UN system regarding environment as a whole. We very much look forward to receiving the system-wide framework of strategies synthesis report, as well as the new terms of reference for the EMG. Regarding the system-wide framework of strategies, we understand it is a work in progress. As the briefing mentions, it is important that it does not just add another reporting layer, but looks for useful and practical outcomes and improvements for the UN agencies. Then regarding the Nexus dialogue mentioned in the briefing and by Mr. Elliot Harris, it would be interesting to hear a bit more on the plans to have this Nexus dialogue in the margins of the UN Environmental Assembly this December. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Elliot, could you answer the questions, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to both distinguished delegates for the questions. With regard to the question on what is taking so long, what obstacles, the Nexus dialogues have been organized by the EMG as a way to facilitate a better understanding of how best we can work on those issues that straddle institutional competencies, that cross over sectors. It's quite clear that there are spillover effects. Policies taken in one sector will affect the way in which policies can be taken in another sector and affect outcomes in other sectors. And the way human society is organized, the way the UN system is organized, and the way member governments are organized is by sectoral competence. It is not natural, nor is it habitual, that policy is formulated by interministerial committee. And so consequently, for the UN system agencies and entities that are collaborating with the EMG, dealing with some of these environmental issues that go across the sectoral borders, go beyond the areas and the limits of their respective institutional mandates, is not an easy thing. And I'm sure that each of you there present in the CPR in Nairobi will understand that very often finding a way to collaborate across these institutional boundaries is not very easy. We intend the dialogues to facilitate an understanding, first and foremost, of the transmission channels, of how work and policy instituted in one sector may affect the situation in another sector, and on the basis of that identification find ways in which we can collaborate at the point of the policy formulation so that we generate outcomes that exceed the impact of the individual policy making in each sector. Clearly, that is not a simple or straightforward exercise. The member states understood and appreciated the work that went into the nexus approach taken between healthy people and healthy environment last year for the last UN. But you will share with me, of course, the understanding of how very complex that undertaking was. It was not something that we just decided on the morning of UNEA that we would discuss. It took several months of preparation between the two staffs to come up with an approach that reflected appropriately the constraints as well as the challenges in the health sector policies, in the environmental sector policies, and in those intersecting areas where those policies interacted with each other. This is what has to happen in many respects, and the situation is complicated further by the fact that the nexus issues are not always limited to just two sectors. Now, the approach that we're proposing is to identify those areas that have a neutral impact, a positive impact, or a negative impact, and we have certain gradings of the extent, the intensity of that impact. And based on the identified impacts, the transmission channels, we will discuss among ourselves and with the representatives of the various agencies involved how policies can and should be adjusted to take advantage of the spillovers or to mitigate the negative impact, negative spillover effects. But clearly this is something that has to be discussed in detail. Now, the idea here of having the policy dialogues is to familiarize all of us within the EMG Secretariat and among the member agencies with this conceptual approach, so that as we go back to formulate our policies within our respective agencies, we are taking into account already the spillover and transmission mechanisms, and we are collaborating with our colleagues in the respective other agencies on those joint and overlapping impacts that can happen through the policy transmission and spillovers from one sector into another. It is a gradual process, just as the formulation of intersectoral policy in any government is a gradual process. We do not expect that we will have a fixed point in time at which we will have learned and mastered the art of nexus policy making. What we intend to create here is a process which will serve all of us over time in improving and refining the way in which we approach policy making at those intersections between sectoral responsibilities. And so when we speak about the hurdles are first and foremost identifying the intersections and the transmission channels in a common language that will allow the specialists in one area to communicate with and understand the specialists in another area. That is sometimes a little bit harder than it might seem on paper, but it is a necessary step to be able to master the whole question of nexus issues going forward. As to the plans for holding one of the policy dialogues in the margins of the next UNEA in December, we would expect to complete the cycle of 4 policy dialogues by the time of UNEA. That means that we will have been preceding the December edition, which will be the wrap-up, if you will, by 3 other dialogues which we hope to hold, as I mentioned, on the margins of other international meetings, including the NTOPF, which is in July, the World Health Assembly, which is in May, and one other occasion, possibly on the margins of the General Assembly here in New York in September. Each of the first 3 dialogues will deal with specific aspects of the approach, the nexus approach. The 4th policy dialogue will attempt to bring together and synthesize the results of those 3 previous dialogues and present the approach in a way that can be operationalized by agencies working together on specific nexus issues going forward. Our intention as well is to provide an approach that could be used also perhaps in other areas where the intersection is between the environmental and non-environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The final question from the EU pertains to the issue of the reporting under the system-wide framework of strategies, and you have hit the nail on the head, sir. One of the things that we were very, very conscious of is the fact that all agencies are already under considerable burden in reporting to their executive boards, reporting to their other constituents, reporting to their existing partners on the various activities that they undertake. There's also a whole layer of new reporting that comes up under the Sustainable Development Agenda, including providing inputs and updates to the high-level political forum on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Consequently, there is neither appetite nor are there resources for any complicated additional resource reporting that would serve the purposes of the system-wide framework. We've consequently designed the reporting framework itself to draw on what the agencies are already reporting. So we're not asking for any new data or any new analysis, but we're asking them to share with the Secretariat the information that they're already providing to other fora, including to their executive boards and governing bodies. And we in the Secretariat undertake to put those data into a common and uniform presentation so that it can be shared across agencies and all agencies informed about what is going on. The hope there is to minimize the additional burden that's associated with the reporting and thus to encourage as much compliance as possible. I think I'll stop there, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. I think that after you finish the Nexus dialogues, we would love to have a briefing from you immediately after or during the open-ended CPR, because it's a very important issue. And you can discuss that with the office in Nairobi. Now, are there any questions from member states? I will give the floor to Pakistan, and after that, if there are no other member states, I will give the floor also for a question from major groups and stakeholders. First, Pakistan.
Thank you, Elliot. That was helpful. Now, I just want to flag a few points. I mean, I realize the onerous nature of the task that you have. You see, this system-wide coherence and this desire to kind of, weave UN processes and agencies into one, flawless, smooth whole has been going around, for a long time. It hasn't really, maybe it has worked, but I have not heard about it. But it hasn't really been a huge success story. Now, in whatever work that is going to be done by the Nexus group and so on and so forth, I think it would be important to be cognizant of the lessons that have already been learned, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and so on and so forth. Now, my personal take on this is that the main stumbling block that you will have eventually when you have identified the overlaps, I mean, other than the overlaps which are very obvious, like when you say that, okay, If the environment is bad, then it has implications for health. Or if the housing is bad, it affects health and then eventually the environment and so on and so forth. If fuel is inadequate, people start cutting down trees and burning them. So yes, the nexus is always there. But then that begs the question as to who will be in the lead role in the process. And that is a central question that will have to be wrestled with by our friends in Nairobi, by ourselves, and of course the experts which are in other stations. That is there an appetite for giving UN Environment the lead role? Does UN Environment feel up to it? Or is it more of a wish? Because we have a lot of wishes kind of embedded in our resolutions, which unfortunately do not come to fruition. So how can, I mean, these are just questions that I would like to leave with you, that who will then, I don't want to use terms like crack the whip and so on and so forth, but who will make sure that, some agencies in the lead role and a lot of mandarins don't get around a table and eventually tell us that, well, it cannot be done because we could not coordinate among ourselves. We have seen it happen in the Peace Building Commission. You can see the proceeds of their meetings, and eventually the countries which are, the worst affected suffer. And the UN experts always have the eternal excuse that, well, there's not enough coordination, there's not enough money, people are not listening to us and so on and so forth. So I think from the environmental angle that will have to be done. If it cannot be done, then let's not overdo it, let's not create another layer of bureaucracy and maybe just confine ourselves to exchanging information, rather than trying to create some super body which sometimes even, appears to be bigger than the General Assembly but doesn't really accomplish anything. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. I give the floor to the major groups and stakeholders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Alice Odingo from SOP International and also NGO Major Group for Global South Organizing Partner. From time to time, we see the role of the major groups continue to diminish or remain unclear. And I would just like us to be enlightened on possible ways of strong engagement with the major groups towards realization of the SDGs with the EMG. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elliot, would you like to reply?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think it's a bit of a difficulty here in terms of understanding what we're trying to achieve under the Nexus Dialogues. And let me be very clear, there is absolutely no intention to create, as you put it, any sort of super entity. What we're trying to do is to facilitate an understanding of how what is done in one sector spills over into what is done in another sector and vice versa, and use that information to formulate the policies that together generate more of a positive impact than they could possibly do individually. It is not about institution building, it is not about creating anything that didn't exist before, it is about facilitating the understanding as a precursor to a more enlightened and effective policy making, which is precisely how it would work in a government as well. You will deal with this nexus issue not by creating a new super ministry that has the power to issue edicts that cover 15 different sectors. You find a way for the ministers of the different sectors to get together and formulate their policies jointly. That is what we are trying to achieve through the Nexus Dialogues. It is to facilitate an approach whereby we first examine the transmission mechanisms between any given two sectors and between subsequent sectors that might also be affected. It allows us to identify what or the ways in which policies in Sector A may influence policies in Sector B. Now, there is not necessarily going to be the need for us at the same time to identify a lead agency that's going to take charge of everything and instruct other agencies what to do. In fact, that might very well be counterproductive. What is needed is for each agency that might have a contribution to make in any given area to be taking into account what others are doing. And in order to know which others they need to interrogate or to find out about, The nexus approach identifies the linkages. That is what it is intended to achieve. So from that perspective, I think the issue of whether or not there is an appetite within the community of agencies in the EMG for UN Environment to take a lead role, that's a question that is difficult to answer ex ante. It depends on what the nexus issue is. If we take, for example, the collaboration that we have in the area of the illegal trade in wildlife, there are aspects of that particular nexus issue that are particularly pertinent or salient from the perspective of environmental crime. The lead agency in those aspects will evidently be the Office of Drugs and Crime. When you look to the protection of the endangered species, the lead agency there will evidently be CITES. When you look to the aspect of the impact of illegal trade in wildlife, flora and fauna on development, the lead agency there will be UNDP. So it's not possible, I would say, at the outset, for any given issue to say, this is the lead agency and all others have to fall in line behind it. It is a question of which agency is best suited to take the lead in which area, depending on their professional competencies. But again, I'd like to emphasize the issue here is not to create a super entity or to have lines of authority designated, is to find ways to better understand how what goes on in one area of policy affects what might go on in another area of policy, and to find the most effective way of combining that. With regard to the question about the scope for engagement with the major groups of stakeholders, I think it is entirely necessary for the various agencies that are part of the EMG to build upon their partnerships with major groups of stakeholders. The way the EMG is put together is it allows for us, through the individual agencies, to interface with implementing partners, with partners that bring in specific expertise, and these partners can and very often are indeed NGOs, civil society organizations, and some of those organizations are represented by the major groups of stakeholders. With regard to the engagement on the nexus issues, again, it is entirely conceivable, for example, when you take the nexus between health and the environment, that the major groups that are particularly concerned and particularly active in the environmental sphere are brought into contact with those that have been working specifically and primarily in the health sector sphere, and that the two of them, just as the two agencies, UNEP and the World Health Organization, have found ways in which they can address issues jointly, that major groups of stakeholders in these two areas find ways in which they can work together as well. This would be one possibility. I think other possibilities exist when we use the relationship that individual agencies have with their respective constituencies of major groups and stakeholders and NGOs, civil society organizations, to draw a better understanding of these transmission mechanisms that I've been speaking of. Because these stakeholders are active on the ground, perhaps even more so than the agencies themselves, and they can understand better how the spillover effects manifest themselves. This would be another opportunity for the groups and the stakeholders to engage with the agencies in their respective sectors and feed into the process of understanding the transmission channels and the nexus impacts a little bit better. As to whether or not there is a specific role within the EMG, this is something that will be looked at again as we undertake the last phase of the study on the effectiveness, and we look at the revision of the terms of reference. At present, the EMG is conceived of as an organization that brings together the individual member agencies, but depending on the working modality and the issue at hand, it's entirely possible to reach out to other stakeholders, other constituencies, and draw on their expertise to inform the work that might be carried out within an issue management group or a task team. But membership in the EMG at present is limited to UN entities as well as other international organizations that have a specific mandate and a range of activities in the environmental sphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elliot, for your presence, and especially you stood up this late. We are looking forward to welcome you in Nairobi during the annual subcommittee meeting, because I heard that you will be coming. So we could continue this dialogue in smaller groups, maybe, if the member states are continuously interested in this subject. So again, thank you very, very much, and hope that the dialogue with you also institutionally with the CPR will continue in the following month. So good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Okay, we exhausted the agenda item 2. And now I would like to ask Jackie and Tessa to join me here for the next agenda item. There is an update on the Environment Under Review subprogram, and also highlights of the GEO6 assessment, which I hope that will facilitate our discussions on identifying the priority areas on pollution. So first I will give the floor to Jackie. To you. Okay, Tessa, please.
Good morning, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tessa Goverse. I'm the coordinator for the Environment Under Review program. This program was established in 2014 with the aim to empower stakeholders in their policy and decision making by providing scientific information and knowledge and keep the environment under review. So the subprogram is consisting of 3 main areas. It's focusing on assessments to facilitate policy making, early warning on emerging issues, and on data and information. By doing so, we aim at enhancing the linkages between science, policy, and governance, and bridging the gap between the producers of knowledge and the users of knowledge. Next. Okay, so today we would like to give you an overview of the subprogram, and we will give you an update on selected products and key deliverables within the subprogram. We also will pay specific attention to the launch of UNEP Live, formerly called UNEP Live, now called Environment Live. And we also would like to give you some insight into the findings of the regional assessments that were done for the Global Environment Outlook on the theme of the 3rd UN Environment Assembly, pollution. So the Global Environment Outlook process started with the development of 6 regional assessments, and these will be the building blocks for the global assessments. These regional assessments were delivered during the 2nd UN Environment Assembly, and now the preparations for the Global Environment Assessment are in full swing. The first meeting of the global authors will be held in Italy, hosted by the government of Italy in Frascati, in February 20th to the 24th, and we will also have there the first meeting of the Innovative Outlooks Group. Environment Live will also be specifically talked to in this presentation, will be critical in underpinning the assessment work by providing data and indicators, and we have a very tight relationship between the work in the program on data, information, but also the assessments. So in terms of the deliverables, the 3rd UN Environment Assembly will be presented with an update, a progress report on the Global Environment Outlook, and the full assessments will be delivered in 2019 for the 4th UN Environment Assembly. And this will be accompanied also by a summary of policymakers, for policymakers. Another key deliverable in the subprogram is the Frontier series. This is a series that is focusing on emerging environmental issues, and the new issues that have been established for the 2017 editions are on the screen. There are antimicrobial resistance, sand and dust storms, off-grid solar power, marine protected areas, environmental displacement, and nanomaterials and pollution.
I just want to take over from Tessa. Thank you so much. What we're trying to do with Frontiers, as you know, is to develop a very robust way of identifying issues that we're going to address. But this time we're trying to make them much more of a communication device, because I think it's very clear from last year's report, which was one of the most reported outputs that UN Environment had, that this is something that has great interest around the world. So we will have a scientific basis to it, but we have other contributors within that to really look at what the implications are. And the sixth item, the nanomaterials and pollution, is of course of particular relevance to the theme of UNEA 3. So we'll come back to that. We're going to launch it in May so that it is ready for World Environment Day. And it has one area, the marine protected areas, which is consistent with what the theme of World Environment Day will be, which is around conservation and ecosystems and protection. I'm going to take over now to really address the issues around what we're doing to support and underpin the delivery of our work in relation to the environmental dimension of the Sustainable Development, the 2030 Agenda. We have established ourselves as the UN Environment Statistics. That means that we have a formal setting within New York, within the UN Statistics Division, and we actually now lead on quite a number of activities that are supported by the development account, the UN Development Account. More particularly, though, we play a very active role in the monitoring and the reporting within the interagency expert group. So through that, we capture not only the work of the member states, but also from the international organizations. And in that context, we then contribute to the Global Sustainable Development Report. There is a new procedure for producing that report. It is made up of a number of experts, 10 scientific experts who are convening in 2 weeks' time in New York, and we then provide underpinning support for their work. And of course this year the theme is on oceans. We are now what's known as the custodian agency for 26 of the Sustainable Development Goal indicators. What that means is that we convene meetings amongst the UN agencies, amongst the multilateral environment agreements, but also we take on board tremendous inputs from member states when we're articulating the new indicators, the ones that haven't yet been reported on. So we have a long dialogue, and we have actually submitted now what are called the metadata sheets in consistent mode, so that the statistics are within the statistical quality assurance procedure, but where they are manageable by many of the member states, either within their current reporting requirements, or we know that there are data available. UN Environment is also involved in a number of other indicator areas where we're not the custodian agency, and in particular member states were rather pleased with how we were handling our dialogue and interactions, and asked us to take on 2 orphan indicators. One is in the area of intellectual property rights, and the other is what is normally referred to as the beyond GDP, this indicator which we're all trying to grapple with. So we have been asked to take the lead in that and to start that dialogue. Not only do we look at the front end, how our indicators collected, and we can come to that a little bit in Environment Live, but also what does it mean? And that's where the link to our assessments is much tighter than it has been in the past. But nevertheless, we have developed data underpinnings to do with ontologies, how do machines talk to each other, how does the metadata all fit together, and we're seen very much as the lead agency in many of those areas. The relief will be for all of you is that you don't have to look at lots of charts if you don't want to. We're working on a lot of infographics to translate, well, what do the indicators actually mean? Are they targeting progress? Are they targeting incremental change? Are they progressive indicators? Or are they really talking about an integrated picture which tells us that on the whole policies are working? And to underpin that, we have received considerable funding from different sources, which enables us to go on the ground and help many of the statistics offices speak to the line ministries that are covering these environment issues. So we're convening meetings in countries where we bring ministries of environment, of water, of forestry, the different domains, together with their counterparts in statistics. Now, that all ends up then in what we now call Environment Live. We have taken on board a lot of feedback over the last 2 years from yourselves, from our constituents, from stakeholders, and we felt that now is the time to relaunch a completely revised version of what was previously called UNEP Live. More user-friendly, much more tightly coupling between data indicators, progress, and so forth. It is an open platform, and I have to stress that since we started, the appetite for open data has increased, and we see more and more countries willing and wanting to have their data not only taken from national websites, but also bringing together other global and regional and local data sets to integrate. We've got more than 900 indicators within Environment Live and 900 live active maps. We provide a lot of tools, as you probably know. We have social media tracking, and we continue to engage with citizen science and our communities of practice. And of course, fundamental to all of this is to show how efforts in one area are synergized or linked or able to enhance and to enforce activities in others. So the idea that if you have a very effective policy basket where you're looking at transport, environment, energy, you will see that the synergies can actually create catalytic activities in many others. I was going to do a live presentation, but this pack of slides will be available for you and be circulated, so I think it's probably easier if I just demonstrate what it now looks like. A greater emphasis on assessments, giving access to world data, clearly an entry point on the Sustainable Development Goals, and get involved, really encouraging many more people to undertake what we call, or what I call, data philanthropy. The idea here is that member states are in the business of data philanthropy because a lot of what they have is already open and accessible. We're now working with the private sector, with citizen groups and others to encourage data philanthropy, to effectively make data available, which we can authenticate and source. A greater emphasis also on search. So this is searching the whole of the UN as well as the UNEP, UN Environment website, but as our web intelligence has shown, we also search globally all the social media and now the scientific literature so that you can genuinely find in all our UN languages what is going on around the world. So this is the introduction. We immediately go, when we tackle data and when we go into assessments, you will see that we can take you directly into regions. You can explore, and more importantly, there's a data downloader. So all the data and the information are accessible and then can be used for other purposes. When we select a country, so on the previous page you can see we've selected a country on the right-hand side, you're then given a number of ways to actually enter into the country's data profile. It's open data access. There is of course a country profile, there are maps and data, there's all the legal instruments, primarily to do with the environment, but it does spill over into other areas, and then resources, of course. So these are the knowledge resources the countries potentially put together, and we certainly do with all the focal points from those countries. So if we go to Uganda and we want to look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the dashboard, here we can see we've selected one under Goal 6, which is access to improved water resources, and that's the rural-urban population. So these indicators are authenticated by the Statistics Office and also by ourselves. But underneath that, you can also see where the data are coming from. And for those who are interested in GEMS Water, the Global Environmental Monitoring System, which we've since taken over in the last couple of years with support from the German government, you can see now that we get to the actual underpinning data that enable countries to start to talk about water quality and the distribution around their different sites. So this links another whole area which is covered by another resolution. Again, in an interesting way, we've brought forward this issue of streamlining of reporting. So we hold firmly to the idea that there are multiple multilateral environmental agreements which are pertinent not only to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also to Africa 2063 and many other visions and other regional processes. And when you sit down and look at it, there are more than 467 environmental obligations that require reporting. So we felt consistently that it is important to enable countries to see just what that multiplicity looks like, but also then to take them and see how they relate to the Sustainable Development Goals and also to other multilateral agreements. So we have done a lot of mapping, synergy mapping, that's all present, and you can look at that under synergies. And I think you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of, you might call it duplication, but you could call it reinforcement of efforts. Data downloader, everything is consistent so that when a member state particularly provides data to the Statistics Office and it is then published and reported, it then becomes accessible to all. So here, for example, all of the indicators and the data are there. So if I'm sticking with the water theme, you can see that now I can have all the different water indicators available. Why is that important? In the past, we've found that a number of ministries within a country can be reporting on proxies and indicators that are similar but not exactly the same. And what we have tried to do then is to clean that up so that now there is one data source and there is one number, for example, on access to improve water resources and so on. So this idea of streamlining, of sharing and having open data means that we can be much more secure in our discussions and in our analysis when we come to look globally, regionally and nationally about what we're talking about. We've also encouraged people to come in with open data on maps. Used to be highly controversial, but UN Environment is in the lead of helping to bring together three very important parallel processes. One is the indicator process led by the Interagency Expert Group. The second is the geospatial, the global geospatial information management. It hasn't made it to a commission yet, but it has huge interest because it comprises the mapping agencies, the Ordnance Survey, for example, and many others linking then to the third flow of work, which is from the group of Earth observations, the group of experts on Earth observation. So all the satellite data. And what we are proposing as an experiment is to bring all three together and to present to the Statistics Commission in 2 weeks' time just how we bring those really powerful data flows, big data, Earth observation, indicators, to fulfill the reporting obligations under, in this case, Indicator 661, which is the extent of freshwater ecosystems. So we're trying to show the power of all this investment around the world on satellites, on sensors, on collecting data, on statistics, to really help us understand freshwater ecosystems. And in this particular case, we have a nice example of where we go to showing clean water under open data now, and we can zoom in, for example, to Africa, often considered to be very data sparse. You can see some of the data that we'll be using in the the global geo on pollution. But if I concentrate on groundwater resources, the kind of miss on the road, on the street, is that there are no data. However, if you look at this map, you can see that through the open data process, which is multiple sources of institutions combining their efforts, we can actually produce up-to-date information on groundwater resources. We will add to this in the next months what's called the GRACE mission, led very much out of the US, which tells us about the gravity and the distortion on the Earth so we can estimate accurately the full extent of groundwater. So it's a hidden resource from the surface, but because of the gravitational distortion, we can actually tell you how much groundwater there is in every location around the world, and we can do it every month. So you see the world is really going very quickly. And I think our job here in UN Environment is to make sure that we take that, it's complicated, it's very large, but to handle it in such a way as to be able to hand that to member states, to their statistics offices, for example, so they can actually use it and then really give much more up-to-date information when policies are being discussed. So this is on the table for the Statistics Commission. I hope that some of you as environment representatives, or not yourselves personally, but from the capitals, will be in New York for the Statistics Commission meetings, because there is a tremendous emphasis on the environment and how we can bring many of these new and innovative data sources really into being to help us do our job. So with that, I just want to say that we've put a lot of emphasis on assessments, and the consistency is that in our GEO6, the regional assessments, we've really made it possible now to connect what's in the book online with the data that you see in the picture with the underlying data or the underlying map. And you can see here, for example, if we've clicked on the region for Africa, we can then link to the data that sits behind those figures. So you can go from end to end, and you can authenticate for policy discussions or just simply for your own peace of mind. We put a lot of emphasis on search. We have a very, very powerful search engine now sitting behind this with parsed ontologies and parsed context, which means that it will find words and relate it to many, many other contexts. So it's not like a Google search. You do not have to have accurate words. You can have concepts, and it will go and find documents, reports, assessments that have been submitted from across the world and from member states as well. So it's a very powerful tool that will enable our geoscientists and many others to do their work. Flipping very quickly then to the last part. We've been requested to support the whole process of running into the UNEA 3 with a theme on pollution. And we were asked, well, what did the regional assessments say? So along with a progress report that you'll have rather formally to the UNEA Assembly itself, there are some highlights which you may be interested just to quickly look at. And again, these will be sent out so you can have more time to consider them. These are the main pollution themes that have been identified throughout all 6 regional assessments. Air pollution, I'm sure we're all clear that everybody seems to consider that to be critical. We have marine pollution, not just marine plastics, but other kinds of marine pollution. Fresh water, of course. Chemicals. Some regions have identified particular toxic substances, paraquat, parabinol, and others. But then we've also got industrial accidents. And then the whole issue of waste, hazardous waste, and where it ends up in terms of destinations in the environment. So I won't belabor this, but you can certainly use this set of slides. But just to recall, we do summarize this in a document that's out on the website. It's a summary of the regional findings. But on air pollution, we do see that in West Asia and Africa, it's really about mineral dust as well as sand and dust storms. Indoor air pollution, certainly in Africa, even in North America, we've seen improvements. But there are considerable concerns around particulate matter and ozone, and still in Europe is considered one of the largest health risks. On marine pollution, still we're looking at land-based sources, marine debris, nutrient enrichment, oil spills, and then of course the issues around contamination coming from the plastics. I won't read all of these, but you can see that every regional assessment has identified something to do with freshwater pollution. Similarly, chemicals tend to come in a run, and there are many underlying chemicals within these lists which we can point to underpin your discussions. We've subsequently gone out to our experts, and we have been given highlights of certain chemicals that are almost priorities above others, and then of course waste. So with that, I'll leave it, but just to say that the go live on the Environment Live is actually next week when we are, in 2 weeks' time, when we go with our experts to Frascati, and thanks again to the Italian government who've really helped us conquer the financial challenges to make sure that GEO6 is on a safe and steady track. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie and Tessa. I think it was a very interesting presentation of the update on the sub-program, and especially the huge amount of data that you will have on the Environmental Life, just to have time to search. And special thank you for the highlights of the emerging issues. I think that it will help very much our discussion on the priority areas of pollution, which comes next. Now, any questions for Jackie or Tessa? First, Colombia, then US, and EU. Well, it's up or down? Okay, so Colombia, US, EU, and Norway, and Pakistan. Colombia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to to Jacqueline for this very complete overview of this new platform. I mean that it's a transform platform. We see that there are a lot of valuable information in this megadata set, and would like to know which strategy UNEP is developing to take this to the ground. For example, to some of the countries, what type of maybe capacity building efforts have you done to take this to each and every one of us countries? And because I see that it's a very important tool for decision making in the countries and for policy guiding. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. U.S.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this great update on all the activities under the sub-program. I mean, I think it's no surprise that the U.S. is very supportive of all this work, and particularly the data-intensive work, and of course GEO6. And I think most everyone in this room is quite supportive, and we really look forward to the innovation and the release of the new website, or the go live next week. I was wondering if maybe you could describe a little bit more clearly the relationship between UN Environmental Statistics and UNSD in New York, how that's related to Nairobi, how it's staffed, just maybe really briefly a glimpse of the relationship. And the Frontiers report, I guess the draft will be coming out in May. I think it would be helpful maybe if we could get a briefing. I think a lot of those items, as Madam Chair, as you noted, I think a lot of those items could be very informative towards, and especially those that relate to pollution, so we can consider them in the formulation of our decisions at UNEA 3. And then I was wondering what plans you had in place. I mean, we're obviously all aware of the go live here in the room, but I wonder in the greater public and the academic community, for marketing purposes, of how you're going to get the word out there, and then potentially track the usage and see how many people are logging on to check the data. And then lastly, maybe just a little bit on the open data resource you referred to. Who are those partners? How do you gather the information? How do you gather the data? Thank you.
Thank you, US. I give the floor to EU.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jackie and Tessa, for very interesting presentation. I think it shows that this sub-program is at the core of linking policy with science. We had some questions and comments regarding maybe first the GEO6 process. First, it would be interesting to hear your views on the relation between the GEO progress report that we would hope, of course, to be delivered as much as possible in advance before the UNEA 3 meeting. Then the UNEA 3 document to be prepared for the ministers, and then the Frontiers 2017 report. So what's the relationship between these important reports? Second, regarding the budget for GEO6, there seems to be still gap for the author meetings in 2017. It would be good to hear a little bit about the budget side and how it relates to the budget made available to the GEO and UNEP Live. So how do you divide different budget lines within the sub-program? Then third, regarding the emerging environmental issues, is UN Environment planning to provide some recommendations on the issues to be tackled? That's a question. Third, fourthly and last, maybe on the environmental live, the presentation was very interesting, and we had the same, in the same line with Colombia to question whether or how you work on the environmental live as a tool in the development of regional and national policies of the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EU. I give the floor to Norway.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for the presentation. Oslo in particular was very grateful for the briefing document that we received in advance. They found it extremely useful and well structured. So I was asked to give positive feedback about that, which is not to say that I don't have anything positive to say after this, fortunately. Also the Frontiers report, we were very interested to notice the topics that were taken up there, and I think I would concur with the USA that it would be very interesting to get a briefing of particularly those pollution-related issues up front with that. I guess a question which it's not really one we should use much time on, but also kind of say, what is the difference between an emerging issue and an early warning? Because, of course, from the Norwegian side, certainly we have always long sensed that dealing with emerging issues is one of the key responsibilities of UNEP that takes us forward, takes us to action. We've seen marine litter and microplastics as an emerging issue, although it's nothing new, but the time is ripe to do something with it. So kind of interesting in that sense, the way you guys approach early warning versus emerging, if you have any thoughts on that. And then Jackie, I thought you were saying something about with the SDG indicators that UNEP has taken on board 2 orphan indicators, and the one was with beyond GDP, which is absolutely an interesting and critical issue. The other one, I thought you said was intellectual property rights. I'm not really familiar, but if, whether offline or here you can say something about that, that would be useful. And then, of course, Norway's prize issue, GO6. We are very excited about the meeting in Frascati in a few weeks, and of course my colleagues will be active and et cetera, et cetera. You can fill in the gaps there. We're very committed to that. They're also interested though in how UNEP Live and GO6 will interact and feed on each other. So if you've got any reflections on that, that would be appreciated. So thank you.
Norway, you mentioned that you don't have anything positive to say?
No, anything.
Just kidding. I give the floor to Pakistan, and after that to reply, and maybe after that if there are questions we continue.
Thank you very much, Madam. Well, as always, very useful information from our chief scientist, and there's definitely wealth of information here. So 2 quick questions. First of all, I presume whatever data you have here, is it put together by UNEP itself, or do you get it from countries and kind of, okay. Now, more practically speaking, is there any mechanism, or let's say, have you been called upon by countries concerned when they have like water problems, like drought or something like that? Have you done any work, for example, in the Republic of Kenya and some other, Republic of Kenya I say because we are sitting here and it's an ongoing issue, and which can have very serious implications. So has any work been done? Do you do it on your own initiative, or do you wait to be called, and and then is there any mechanism for basically, like, for example, I actually raised this question with the Red Cross chief also, that if, for example, if you feel there is like a pattern, like in Pakistan we have more or less a pattern of floods now. Now, if you have a pattern of low rainfall and kind of drought conditions, then should there be some thinking or planning, or okay, how do we make up for that? I mean, if you're totally dependent on rains, and then you have no rains for 6 months flat, and then when the rains come, you have flooding. So you're basically, in a very uncomfortable situation. So is the UNEP helping in that, or can it, or will it? I mean, it's basically that kind of a question. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Jackie.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and really, really, really great questions. So let me just take them one by one, because although there's some overlaps, I think it would be quite useful just to spend a small moment on this. Taking the knowledge that we have, as a bundle, we've got Environment Live, which is a repository, but also an active exchange of data that's going on with member states, but also with scientific institutions, with the space agencies, and so forth. So in a way it presents a completely unique resource in that we can manage big data, but we can also manage an individual data point that's coming from a monitoring station. And that's something which many member states, for a variety of reasons, don't handle easily. They either have interministerial issues or they don't necessarily have the analytic capability. So yes, one of our big pushes is not just to take technology out, but actually to make it relevant to assessment, to policy making, and so forth. So we have a number of countries who have come forward in relation to funding that we have, and for example the European Union has funded a very nice project with us together with colleagues from the European Environment Agency and the Economic Commission for Europe, called SICE, the Shared Environmental Information System, and that touches on up to 30 countries, literally going from why share data, what do we share, how do we do it, what is it used for, and then how do you take it out into the policy environment so that it's relevant and understandable. Those 30 countries are spread across Central Asia, the neighborhood, Africa, and so forth. We have a similar kind of funding approach from Brazil for Latin America. We have, through the development account, the ability to now be on the ground to strengthen statistics offices. And we're very, very fortunate, and we have funding from the Global Environment Facility, which is also for capacity development, specifically in the area of sustainable development goals, indicators, data, and information. What we have insisted, though, is that we provide a common approach. So it's a common package. It's the same. So whether you're sitting in Afghanistan or Bosnia-Herzegovina, we will be able to connect your air quality monitoring data, for example, in a real-time capacity into something which will help report in relation to whatever the regulatory framework is. So if it's the European framework or whether it's a regional framework, that's the idea. So working with our colleagues in the regional offices, we tailor the policy world, and that's why we have the reporting obligations. We tailor the data to the policy needs. So right now we have active programs in about 40, maybe 50 countries specifically, all developing countries, to actually enable not only the use of Environment Live, but what we call the Information Reporting Information System, IRIS as it's known. And that is to facilitate going from a data point all the way through and up into assessments. So we're feeling that we're moving very considerably in the right direction, which is this coherence amongst ministries. And the good thing is it's not just for environment. This is actually covering economics, finance, transport, energy, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, you name it. They come into the room to have that conversation. So then that sort of data intensiveness is what we carry over then into the assessments. We don't ever want to be in a position again where we produce an assessment and somebody picks it up and says, but you're using data from 2010 and this is an assessment that's written in 2015. What's going on? Now if it's genuine, if it's a statistical survey which is only undertaken every 5 years, so be it. But we know for the environment that many, many more data sources are available from government sources, but from also authenticated institutes. And part of the open data infrastructure is to enable it to make it very, very simple for people to upload, to become data philanthropists, to contribute. And then this is where UN environment statistics is very important. One of our jobs is to try to piece all of that together. Because what we don't have necessarily is we do not have globally coherent or necessarily standardized data coming from every part of the world. So one of the things that we concentrate, and this is where our relationship to New York in the statistics division is very important. We have a team now, and we're strengthening it further and faster to be able to take data and make it statistically robust according to statistical criteria and standards so that it can then be reported into New York. So we have a team, I think they're all in the room actually, and we're just about to recruit 2 more formally known as professional statisticians for that purpose. So our team has gone from myself as the chief statistician with 1 person to now a team that will be probably 6. And we're really seeing a huge interest in having that professional capacity here in Nairobi to actually be able to report authentically. That means that we have a lot of confidence now in how we work with our multilateral environment agreements who don't do statistics. And so working with the Convention on Biological Diversity, with the CITES group, the international trade and so forth, we will then, in a way, as the custodian agency, ensure that quality. It doesn't stop reporting, but we try to ensure the statistical integrity of what is then actually put out on the table. And we're doing the same with GEMS Water, and we'll do the same with all of these different domains. Now for frontiers then, let me just go on to open data. Open data is, it's really taking off. It is a place where both governments, local authorities, cities, so institutions that we would recognize in our stakeholder group are also reporting. So it's called open data. And there we see the need for handling at the level of big data. So we're part of a team, a committee, constituted with UN Statistics, the World Bank, ourselves, several of the big statistics offices from around the world, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, because you need to handle the data in a particular way. So open data often brings big data issues with it. So there we see that we want to be platform neutral, but at the end of the day, you have to have a provider, unless we're going to set up data servers everywhere. So we are encouraging member states to have that dialogue through the views of the Statistics Commission so that we can agree what is it that we need to provide these services for open data and big data. We source and authenticate everything that's in UN Live, Environment Live, so that you can always go back to the person who's actually uploaded it and made it available. We also make sure that for developing countries we have something called a progressive API, which means that if you're not connected to the internet, you can still operate it entirely. So when you've downloaded it, it is the latest version, so it looks and feels exactly as if you're connected to the internet. And then periodically you will connect and update, but you'll have access to all of those data, which means that for most purposes you will never feel that you're disadvantaged by not having access anymore to internet. You'll basically get the look and feel as if you are connected, and you'll be able to run it on all the platforms that we have here. So plans for marketing are obviously viral marketing through yourselves, through the capitals, through the different networks we now have. We have huge data networks. We have got, as I said, the commissions, we've got the geospatial, and we've got the private sector who are extremely impressed, I must admit, by Environment Live. They see this as the place where we've put the really cutting-edge technologies sort of behind the scenes, but are starting to deliver things that people really want to use. And therefore, I think demand will just skyrocket. And that's why citizen science and other areas will inevitably grow. And our duty of care will be to be selective. What is it that we need that helps us do our job collectively? So we won't just become the dumping ground for everything. If I move on very quickly then to how is it connected to geo, there is a special area, you'll see it on the front in assessments, which is called the geo or the assessment workspace. So our experts in Frascati in 2 weeks' time for the first time have a dedicated space where when they want to know about indicators, what's happening in countries, the data are right there. They can see it, they can combine countries, they can do all the kinds of simple analysis that they want. And we're going to Frascati very specifically to train our experts how to use Earth observation and space data. So we're going to provide actual training to our experts so that they can, whether they're water specialists or air specialists, they will get the very best. And we're very grateful to the European Commission and the Union because we've just been given the green light for a preferred partner so that we get fast and preferential access to all of the Copernicus data, which is global data on all the things we're interested in. You can name it, many, many environmental things. So we've just signed an agreement and we're having dialogue with the European Union on that. So that means we get the benefit of the $3 billion worth of investment in the Copernicus Sentinels. So that's absolutely, I mean, it's a must for us to do our job. But these are global data sets and they're open and they're free, but we can articulate them so they're useful for assessments. Which brings me then to the issue of early warnings and emerging issues. An emerging issue, exactly as you've said, is something that's maybe been around for a while but hasn't either had political will or we haven't really understood how pervasive it is, or whether it really has gone beyond precaution and we need to do something. As opposed to an early warning system, which I'm sure all of you would recognize if I told you it could be the early warning system for sand and dust storms, it could be a tornado early warning system. And then, in between those two, I see that as we have access now more and more to the big data, like the groundwater, as I was showing you, we can start to really facilitate with member states a sort of intermediate, a sort of a midterm warning system that says your groundwater is getting perilously low, here are the data, here are things that you could do. So it's not early warning in the next 3 days, something's going to happen. This is actually something that's in the medium term. I think it will be incredibly useful for member states to have that. And as the world is changing under climate change and so on and so forth, what you're going to get in Environment Live, and we can tailor that. So we've already had requests from Indonesia vis-a-vis forest fires, from sand and dust storms. Of course, you know there's a collection of countries extremely interested in that. And we see all around the world there are these slow burn issues which can suddenly take off. And I think that's where Environment Live will come into its own in the coming few years. We need data exchanges, but that's where we're going to go. Let me go to Frontiers then, and I'll end. With Frontiers, it's a very exciting set of issues. Each one of them has a kind of tentacle out, which may be not directly linked to pollution per se today, but I can see has some resonance and relevance. So the nano area is both positive and negative. We're talking about the positive side of nano, which is carbon fiber to build new buildings, new innovations that are coming on board where we have already sight of buildings that will be created out of carbon fibers, grown by algae, but with particular molecules added so that the building will become a battery. This is probably the most cutting edge science that we see. So imagine that every building is itself a battery. So you don't need lithium anymore. It means that every part of it can be charged and you can download energy on any surface. So these are the kinds of things that nano will bring to us, but they're also dangerous from an environmental perspective. So I think if you're interested, we could provide, as the launch goes ahead, a very specific dedicated briefing for you to bring out some of these issues, because when it hits the press, and it certainly will hit the press, it's part of the G7 planning and so forth, I think some of them could be extremely interesting for you to have prior to those kinds of meetings, and we're very happy to do that and circulate early drafts with you. Thank you. Oh, and the budget. Online for this year, we have received some additional funds from the Norwegian funds that were given last year. So we're very pleased to say that from our internal resources, we will be able to find funds for an authors meeting later in the year, which is extremely important. So thank you again, Norway. And I believe that with the sort of head of wind and with a lot more emphasis on maybe smaller meetings and more agile approaches, we can go into 2018 with a modicum of comfort that we can cover the basics. But it still is on the table, and it is your decision, or the country's decision, do you want a separate meeting for the summary for policymakers, which, as you know, is a big ask. It's a lot of money, and we've never had to do a summary for policymakers where we've had to invite all of you together. So that still is a big ticket item in 2018, which we do not have funding for. So, but otherwise, I think we're in much better shape than the last time I spoke to you. And as I say, I thank the Italian government for their generosity for this meeting. It's really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I will give the floor to Tessa for one more reply.
Thank you very much. With regard to the linkage between the progress report for GEO6 and the pollution theme, the progress report will give an update on where we stand on state and trends. As it is an integrated assessment, obviously pollution is part and parcel of this, and the pollution theme and the supporting materials being developed for that will be grounded in the information that we get from the Global Environment Outlook and other assessments, and we will ensure that we have a very strong link in developing both between both the kind of institutional setup and the teams working on it, as well as in ensuring that the various pieces of evidence that come into the pollution paper are also backed up by the Global Environment Outlook Progress Report.
Thank you. I see Costa Rica another question, and if anybody else, please signal your intent to ask questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a specific question. I would love to know how are you going to get involved the private sector? What are the win-win situations to link with the pollution team? And is the private sector contributing to give data to see the impact of the cost of pollution? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, Jackie, please.
Thank you. As we go forward with GEO particularly, we are encouraged by the fact that for the open dialogue that we're going to have in Frascati with GEO is going to be accompanied by a private sector dialogue alongside. So we have Fiat, we have Enel, we have many of the big companies tackling and being asked questions exactly on these lines about the environment. So from the very get-go, as we start going forward on the global GEO, we want and have planned for consistent dialogue with the private sector. And it is specifically because of data. And this is why we talk about data philanthropy. Within, within the UN Statistical Division and within the Big Data Working Group set up by the previous Secretary General, it's actually made 50% of the members come from the private sector. We've been tasked as a secretariat by our head, by Eric, to ensure that there is full private sector engagement in the preparation of the paper for the UNEA 3 on pollution. And so one of the things that I personally was taking care of in a couple of weeks ago was to talk to the chemicals industry and the pharmaceutical industry at a meeting held in the US where we tackled issues of, well, substitution, what's coming down the line, issues of things that probably should be banned, chemicals that are legacy chemicals, and what do companies have in their store cupboard to help clean up and so forth. So there will be a very active engagement. I will, and I certainly will defer also to my colleague Leisha, who's here, who's leading on that aspect. But let me leave one point with you. When we were with colleagues in China and with the minister, he specifically put a problem on the table which I'm sure will come up, and that is currently there's a gap between the legislature and the judiciary as to what is the real cost of a chemical pollution incident. Where do the norms come from? And this is still, I think, a very difficult question for us to address. And I'm not convinced that we can do that in this round, but it will be there in the background. And all I can say is I think our duty of care is, because we have an ethics approach now to our work, we are talking about social equity and so forth. I believe that in the GEO we will take great care in trying to bring to your attention the exposures and any inequity in exposure to chemical contaminants. So I think this is one of the areas of research where we have data coming in, and we will try to articulate that so that at least you're not in the dark when it comes to discussing what the implications are of some of the chemicals once they hit the environment. There we rely on public health officials, we rely on having good estimations of where vulnerable populations are, but I think it's certainly in the cross-cutting theme that we have. So GEO is doing the themes by air, land, water and so on, but we have very strong cross-cutting themes on health as well as on chemicals and the economy itself.
Before I give the floor to Uganda, I'm sorry I haven't seen you. I will give the floor to Lygia to complement the reply from Jackie on private sector. Do we have more questions? Costa Rica. Then put it down because it's confusing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Tessa and Jackie, for bringing in the pollution paper. As you know, we're grounding it very much in the GEO6 process. With regard to the question that came from Costa Rica on the private sector engagement, apart from what Jackie told you, right now Eric is in Brasilia, the executive director is in Brasilia for a SciChem meeting to also bring the pollution agenda to the attention of people attending the SciChem meeting. We also plan to have this kind of an engagement right through all of the activities that he and the Deputy Executive Director would be involved in, where the private sector is engaged. However, over and above this, we plan to get the finance sector involved with the pollution agenda because we think that would be a very important piece of our moving forward, whether it's with regard to due diligence, whether it's regard to regulatory policies, etc. But we also plan, and this is completely in the making right now, to have a private sector dialogue on the costs and benefits of pollution. We haven't come up with an agenda yet, but we thought that would be a useful way to get the private sector engaged. So it's still in the formative stages, so I can't give you details now, but the plan is to have a brainstorming or a workshop around this idea. So any ideas you have around this would be great to take this forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lydia. My question is, before I give the floor to Uganda and Pakistan, to this workshop, interested member states could participate, or you just want us for brainstorming, like the agenda?
No, you're very welcome. Our whole idea is that we need to have as much stakeholder engagement as possible. This agenda is not going to work purely led by UN Environment. It has to be a complete engagement of different stakeholder groups. So very welcome to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will give the floor to Uganda, and I understand Pakistan also wants to. But first, Uganda.
Thank you, Chair, and we wish to thank Jacqueline and Tessa for the briefing. We find it quite adequate and very useful. And Chair, having said that, we are looking at the information which has been provided to us to be useful in two different ways. One, since the data, the scientific data, is disaggregated up to the level of up to the country level. There is the global, regional, and the country one. So we look forward to discussing details as far as our region is concerned, as well as at the country-specific details. But Chair, I think more important is that this information should be able to help us in agreeing and fine-tuning the theme for UNEA 3. As we shall all agree, scientific data never lies unless it is utilized for a wrong purpose. But otherwise it never lies. Therefore, we expect that they will be available, Jacqueline and Tessa will be available to guide us so that we are able to utilize the scientific data to inform the decisions that we may take. Having looked, because there was prior circulation of this information. When we looked at it, we found that the way we shall have to approach different regions and different sub-regions may not necessarily be the same for each and every region. One aspect of pollution may be more pronounced in one region than in the other. So that's why for Africa we had this other theme which is broad and able to accommodate various regions in their own emphasis where they want to put it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. You are very right. It's important for us to identify the priority areas for pollution based on scientific data. Pakistan. But please don't forget that we have one more topic to discuss.
Thank you, Madam. Very quickly about the cost of an accident or something like that. Now, first of all, obviously, it's important to bridge the gap between judiciary and legislature. But that you can only do if you can make an accurate assessment. which, as we saw in the case of, let's say, nuclear accidents, you know, and not to sort of draw a parallel, but when insurers got together, they basically said that it's practically impossible to insure against something at that scale. And then we have seen chemicals doing more or less the same thing, you know, not to be specific, but there have been accidents. And then there is like oil spills and all that. I wonder if we can treat it as that. So there are two aspects. I mean, obviously one is to for the destination country to know what they are getting into. And it's important that processes which have been outlawed in the West should not be dumped in the East, which has been seen sometimes, you know. DDT was banned in the West and then it was being sprayed around in the third world, for want of a better term, sorry. So in that also, I think there is this moral obligation also. Because many of us frankly don't know. We only find out after 2 generations, you know, when we have stunted children that, oh my God, you know, this was because of some chemical that came from God knows where. So I think there has to be a uniformity in that. And in that, I think there is a need. So basically what you will need to perhaps do is to see it in conjunction with environmental law, which again is a very infant concept, and from whatever is available. And then obviously with the private sector, with the insurance companies and so on and so forth. And then maybe countries should have the option of knowing that, okay, this is potentially dangerous and then we should not get into it, you know, rather than setting up a plant and then it exploding, it explodes, kills God knows untold people, and then we are grappling with, okay, how much compensation and who's responsible, and the person has run away and there is no extradition treaty and so on and so forth. So I think these aspects have to be kept in view, that the same sensitivity that we see in the Western Hemisphere should also be available, at least the information that, okay, this is what it entails, don't get into it. You know, kind of like smoking. It kills you. And now even, you know, in countries which are very smoker friendly, you know, companies are forced to print those very ghastly images and all that. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Bangladesh. Please, your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jacqueline and Teresa, for very comprehensive and informative presentation. I have rather very small input and clarification. Today, the world is witnessing a lot of war-like situations. In many places, we witness violence and conflicts, and increasing use of munitions of different times, the ordnances. And somewhere and some places, these are used as on trial basis. But consequently, they contaminate and pollute our environment. Would you take this issue into consideration for making comprehensive strategy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? And I will give the floor to Jackie, please.
I'll be very brief, and I know there were a couple of questions that were asked, which I could come back to orphans and all of that, if I might. But to your points, with Uganda, I think we're fortunate that we have had the regional assessments, which already tell us that the world of contamination is not spread evenly, and that we have legacy, we have DDT not spread evenly, and so forth. But be very, very clear, we have chemicals all over the world that have kind of spilled out through all kinds of irresponsible behavior. So it is a global issue. The question is, we would use different practices and policies depending on the intensity and the pervasiveness, and also the ecosystems that are affected. So one of the things that I'm going to be really pushing in the GEO discussions, and thereafter when obviously the paper for the UNEAS 3 is prepared, is if you want an action-orientated agenda, we have to tailor it to be relevant. And therefore, we should bear in mind that there will be, for example, areas where you want to set limits. Maybe there are things you want to ban, but each and every one of them will be a cocktail of policies that need to be tailored either to a regional or a national context. And I think that's where we look very much to working with our colleagues in the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm community, and so on and so forth. There's a huge amount of experience. But what we haven't got is a way to extract out an agenda which is practical, global, and will actually make a difference. And I think that's what we have before us for the next few months. And for that reason, I was delighted when the Office of the Ombudsman from New York contacted me with a very, very strong offer. And I think it's interesting and worth considering. Just because you have private sector, citizens, governments often pitched at each other in insurance industries, they have found in some very contentious issues joint fact-finding to be extremely good, where joint fact-finding means you agree on what are the evidence sources, what's the evidence on the table, and you don't simply agree that science is the only facts. There are other things that need to be put very, very clearly. And I just put it to you that as part of our discussions and briefings, that we shouldn't just assume that we have everything that needs to be known about science, about the chemical contamination. There will be many, many other issues that are there, social equity and so forth. So I put that as possibly as an item you might want to consider. It would be innovative, it would be extremely, I think, elucidating, and I suspect it might give much stronger decision making when you get to the UNEA setting. And that would include things like ordnance and other contaminants that are out there that haven't even yet made it onto the list of contamination. We do have ordnance in our purview, we have nuclear, we have many things in our purview, but I suspect that what we'll try and do in the GEO process is to rank those issues which are the biggest and where if you focus activity, you'll get the greatest outcome to the benefit of the greatest number of people. And that, I think, is our sort of duty of care at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other question. I really appreciate, Tessa, Jackie, your presence, and I hope that we continue our dialogue on, especially on the areas of pollution. Thank you very much. So we exhausted agenda point number 3. And let's turn our attention to number 4, preparations for the 2017 Environmental Assembly session. You know that at the 137th meeting of the CPR, we agreed on the theme in general terms, but we discussed and agreed also to continue discussing the wording of the title and also on priority areas. For this, you have received a synthesis of all contributions. Just one note that only the member states who put forward proposals for the wording of the theme were mentioned. So you have seen at the end that only those countries who put for wording on the theme, but not the other part of the synthesis is a compilation of proposals, but without naming the countries. So what I would like to suggest is to start on the wording of the theme. If you have any preference, we should have, it's my opinion, if you allow me, to have a short and striking title and to be understood, simple title which should be understood by everybody. And after that, we heard Jackie's input on areas, different areas based on scientific data and regional assessment. There are many areas that needs attention. The question is how we identify those 3, maximum 5 areas of pollution that we will focus on in the next session. So I will open the floor. First of all, please reflect on the wording, if you have any preference and on this particular issue, and also the pollution areas. It's very clear that we have to have action-oriented pollution areas. It's very important for the success of the next session. So I'm opening the floor. The first is Costa Rica, second US, third Botswana, and fourth EU. and after that Japan. So first is Costa Rica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to take the opportunity to talk about a message that the President of UNEA will give to the audience. Thank you, Chair. I would like to take the opportunity to give a short and informal report from Mr. Edgar Gutierrez, Costa Rica Minister of Environment and President of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, a report on the road towards UNEA 3. I would like to inform you that as President of UNEA, Mr. Gutierrez defined the following 4 elements as key for a successful run-up towards UNEA 3. First, transparency. Second, stakeholders' engagement, and in particular, the participation of civil society to allow for full inclusiveness. Third, an effective follow-up of resolutions. And fourth, a good and efficient communication among all of us. With regard to transparency, an online platform has been established where everyone can access relevant documents, minutes, and discussion pieces that relate to UN environment. Also, in relation to transparency, the UNEA President established an international support group in Geneva, meant to promote the UN Environment Assembly's process. This was done with the support from the Costa Rica ambassador in Geneva, Mr. Elaine White. This group intends to serve as a hub for information exchange and promote the participation of member states that have no physical representation in Nairobi. At the same time, we recognize that funding for UNEA 3 is still a challenge. The President of UNEA wishes to convey the message that it is essential that member states step up and provide donations for UNEA 3. And that they help consolidate funding commitments that guarantee a successful UNEA. Furthermore, the President of the United UN Environment Assembly would like to inform you that he is working with the Secretariat to develop a draft roadmap that lays out the outcoming meetings in the run-up to UNEA 3, as well as milestones and deadlines. This roadmap will help ensure that the process is clear and that there is time to discuss the outcome document and the resolution to be adopted at UNEA 3, and that all stakeholders are engaged in the due process. The roadmap will be shared by the Secretariat in February. This is a key month for our work since we all will begin the drafting process of the relevant documents for UNEA 3. We will ensure active participation and constant engagement in the relevant discussions going forward. The President will also like to inform you that 2 joint meetings with the Bureau of the CPR have been scheduled for the coming months. The first one will be on March 15, right after the 4th annual subcommittee meeting. This will allow for the Bureau to become informed about the results from the annual subcommittee meeting and take the meeting's consideration into account. The second joint meeting will be a retreat to be held in Costa Rica as a follow-up to the World Ocean Day. These meetings are held in conjunction with the CPR in order to guarantee clear communication and transparency about our actions and decisions. With regard to celebrations in relation to World Ocean Day, I would like to inform that Costa Rica will be hosting a dialogue meeting in our country. Costa Rica is working closely with the Secretariat in planning this event accordingly to ensure it will serve as an opportunity to inform UNEA-3. It will address the topic of ocean health and pollution. The dialogue will be held with stakeholders from academia, civil society, policymakers, NGOs, and the private sector. It will take place on June 8 and 9 in Costa Rica. The dialogue will be complementary to the UN Ocean Conference in New York. It will discuss measures that need to be taken now in order to guarantee the health of our oceans. It will focus on clean oceans for all. Finally, I would like to state that it is important for my Minister of Environment, Edgar Gutierrez, and our special mission to UN Environment that you are well informed about our vision and actions, particularly in relation to the presidency of UN Environment. Costa Rica and the UNEA presidency believe that without a healthy environment, humanity cannot prosper. Therefore, it cannot achieve happiness without the three dimensions of sustainable development. Costa Rica wants dignity for all, peace and health for all, a healthy environment that serves humanity. The UN Environment Assembly in December provides an opportunity for all of us to get us closer to that common goal. Costa Rica looks forward to working with member states, the Secretariat, and stakeholders to make the UN Environment Assembly a success that inspires us on the road towards the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Costa Rica. I'm not reflecting on this declaration. Does the President has any messages about the wording of the team?
Yes, we have.
Then please share that quickly, because this is the topic of our meeting, and also priority areas. So if you have it, please share it.
Yes, thank you. But I have to give the message from the President. He asked me to deliver the message to
Okay, then
thank you. I'm going to do the work
okay,
of the team. Thank you.
Okay, but please very, very short.
The suggested by the Republic of Costa Rica, a clean environment for all. This is our team, our name. The rationale for this title is clean is a easy to understand, it's a common language term for a pollution-free condition. Environment is what the UN Environment Assembly's mandate is about. For all, it is in line with the universal notion of leaving no one behind, paying attention to the Human Rights Agenda and Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to US.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for putting together this synthesis. Just briefly, just a quick comment on the synthesis as a whole. I'm going to address the issues at hand, but this is, I think, a good basis for conversation, but I can tell you that sending this document off to Washington was frightful for them, because essentially as it stands now, it's kind of like a wish list of everyone's unedited desires to come out of UNEA. So I think certainly we can discuss the first 2 points today, but in consideration of the third area, the potential outcomes, I'm just putting it to you, Madam Chair, that maybe you'll want to consider how to approach that at the next subcommittee.
That's why thank you very much, US. That's why I specify that the wording of the team and priority areas, the outcome the actual outcome discussion will be on the 16th, after we will have the debriefing and discussion with the legal counsel. So if you can, please do not touch the outcome, only the wording of the team and priority areas, because that's the topic of our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and certainly I'll address that, just to signal that the second half of the document may be difficult to discuss. So for the first 2 points on the wording of the theme, I would propose here very early on that we, or the United States proposes that we could potentially defer the wording of the theme potentially to the CPR Bureau, pending comments today. And I just think it could then be presented to all of us on a non-objection basis. That's just a suggestion, and I look forward to other people's opinions there. Having said that, I'll add a couple of comments from the United States, areas that we see could be a little bit of a concern. One, the idea of delivering a pollution-free planet, it's a tad idealistic. It's beautiful, it flows, but it's something, I think it's a little bit unrealistic to present that as something that we can do within the next 10 months. So that's just food for thought. As well as the Global Action Plan, there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about whether we can actually pursue that. To actually put that in the title kind of presupposes we'll get to some sort of global action plan. I don't think we're quite there yet. The United States isn't firmly behind that idea at this point. And then lastly, the term transboundary, just saying, might be a bit of a difficult term to digest in the title. But having said that, I'm perfectly happy to defer the judgment, even if it were one of those items on a non-objection basis. I think we could all consider that. Moving on to the priority areas. So I think generally speaking, the 5 areas, other issues aside, maybe we'd have to find a home for those, but the first 5 bullet points are good areas of focus. And we have no problem with keeping it broad and hopefully finding some other way to focus down. But I think all 5 of these areas, there's important initiatives that could be taken. Now, when we get more specific under the areas, we probably will have, the United States will probably have a little bit more difficulty with some of the suggestions. And I can go through those really quickly. Number 1, under air pollution, we firmly believe that sand and dust storms are not air pollution, and if we introduce that to a political forum and discuss it as air pollution, that could be a difficulty. We also note that sand and dust storms has been addressed, was addressed in a resolution in the previous UNEA, was also, action items were placed into the program of work and budget. There was also a discussion at the General Assembly on this item, so we're not sure it's the best use of time at UNEA 3, and we don't want to merge the issues of pollution and sand and dust storms. Although sand and dust storms is a very important issue, must be addressed, we are concerned that putting it under the rubric of pollution is a political message that might be a bit troublesome. The other area that struck out to us, and I guess it's related, is land degradation and desertification. So this is an issue that Washington considers very important, that we avoid discussion of this under the pollution rubric. Having been here at the earlier discussions, though, I do understand that there's a bit of consensus behind this. We agreed on pollution knowing that there were a couple of other areas that member states would possibly like to address at UNEA 3. So I think we just need to be careful if we are to frame that, to find consensus, to frame a pollution conference and then address issues like sand and dust storms or like land degradation and desertification. We're going to have to find a way to separate that out and to show that we're not officially equating this to a pollution item. So I just wanted to lay down some early markers there and some concerns we have, but I look very much forward to hearing other member states, and I'd be remiss if I didn't note that the United States is particularly interested in the water pollution area, wastewater treatment in particular. We may be in the position to explore that in a decision. We're still in early discussions back in Washington in that area, but thank you very much.
Thank you, US. I will give the floor to EU, but before I will read the countries, the signal they want to intervene. It's Botswana, Japan, Switzerland, Singapore online, China, Norway, and Colombia. If somebody else, please signal it to me. So I give the floor to EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the exact formulation of the title, the EU and the Member States have been quite flexible throughout the way. They have some criteria that we'd like to see, that it's simple, positive, and solution-oriented. Looking at the list that has been proposed by the Member States, those 12 proposals, most of them fulfill that criteria. Then we would like it to be as well a catchy one and reduced to under 5 words. So that would take some of this proposal out of our radar. But we are flexible. I think the US proposal to take it to the bureaus and bring it to the non-objection of the CPR sounds like a feasible way to advance with this. Then I take it straight away to pollution areas as well. Regarding the priority areas, we have had some criteria that we have highlighted previously. It should have global relevance, and it should have a link to the main theme. It should come to an appealing and meaningful result at UNEA 3. It should have added value, like for the UNEA Environment Assembly, and it should be feasible, so there should be action after it. And then it should be linked to the SDGs to be reviewed in 2018. These proposals that are coming from the member states and the UNEP, UN Environment, has taken forward in the outline. These 5 topics, they seem to be quite in line with this criteria, and the EU has proposed some 3 themes, and I think they are included in those 5. So that's from our side. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Botswana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the African Group. We just want to thank the Secretariat for the compilation text, and we do acknowledge that indeed it incorporates the African Group submissions. In terms of the theme, Madam Chair, we still believe that we should have as broad as possible a theme which accommodates different development levels or different experiences of different countries, especially looking at their levels of development. Now, concerning the Global Action Plan on Pollution, we looked at it and we just wanted further explanation on what this means, because for us it will appear as if it's some sort of a document with some sort of timelines which could be restricting to member states and affecting the various policies of member states. We didn't understand what this global action on pollution is. Is it some sort of a roadmap with timelines? And our understanding of an action plan is that it usually follows some sort of an agreement. We're going to have a resolution then backed by an action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Botswana. On action plan, that is an idea that we didn't start discussing. What is it exactly? So I would suggest to postpone it on the actual, with the outcome on the 16th, and we can look into ways and we can define it. We can look at the ways to develop it and what it should contain if we agree on it. So that is a discussion for the 16th, if you agree, okay? Right, thank you very much. Next is Japan.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. First of all, we would like to thank Secretariat, distinguished delegates, for proposing the interesting ideas on wording and the title. We can accept most of them, but furthermore, so if we choose some specific wordings, number 6, people, planet, priority, a cleaner planet for healthy, prosperous lives, and 7, healthy environment for all, and 8, towards a clean planet, and 12, a clean environment planet. Sounds comfortable to us. These wordings give us the impression that we make effort toward safer environment through risk reduction as well as removal of pollutant. Risk management of pollution is one of the realistic approaches to ensure safer environment. So we think such implications should be included into the title. So in this regard, so we would like to support these titles. And I'd like to talk about the priority areas. So we can support air pollution and marine pollution as priority areas. And in addition, so we would like to support sound management of chemicals and waste, and education and dissemination on pollution. This is other issues in this paper we would like to add to be dealt with under the theme as well. Regarding the sound management of chemicals and waste, we still have a lot of chemicals and waste which we don't realize how harmful to our health and environment. Therefore, it is important to manage those risks in a preventive way through collecting and garnering scientific knowledge. And so we believe that sound management of chemicals and waste should be in the priority areas. And regarding education and dissemination on pollution, cooperating with a variety of groups such as private sector and civil society and so on is crucial to address pollution. And we think it is important how we share and disseminate scientific knowledge and experiences of suffering from pollution in order not to repeat same mistakes. So we would like to suggest education and dissemination is included in other issues in this paper as an overarching matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Japan. Next is Switzerland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly on the title and its exact wording. We would like to argue that the Assembly in the end should lead to concrete and actionable outcomes with clear political messages. That's why we need to be very specific with the wording. And it's also for that reason that we like the option 10, the Global Action Plan on Pollution, very much, because we think it corresponds best to these requirements. And we think it can have impact if this is a political message coming from Ministers of Environment. But I took note of the questions and reservations linked to this topic, and it's good if we can take this discussion up again next time we meet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we started just discussing it. This is the first meeting, so I foresee other meetings too. Next on my list is Singapore. Singapore is online. I give you the floor.
Hi, good day to all. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, we'd like to thank the Secretariat for compiling national submissions into the document on synthesis of input to serve as a useful basis for the preparations of UNEA 3. So on the actual wording for the theme on pollution, it has to be fit for purpose, practical, and holistic. As currently the list is long, there might be merit for some work by the Secretariat to help streamline the various options into a more manageable list, especially based on today's discussions. These streamlined options should be broad and must cover the various interests that countries have on pollution so that no issue is lost. This would be helpful in helping us all to reach a consensus. On the priority areas that UNEA 3 should focus on, Singapore is broadly supportive of all the areas listed in the Secretariat's document. Nevertheless, to strengthen our process to reaching a better outcome for UNEA 3, we have a few comments to which we hope can be reflected in further iterations of such a document. First, With regard to the issue of air pollution, it would be important that our discussions also address the issue of air pollution in the form of particulate matters, such as PM10 and PM2.5. This is given as such particulates are a major form of air pollution. They can also have significant impact on human health. For example, PM2.5 can penetrate deep into the lungs, resulting in respiratory conditions. Second, water pollution is a critical aspect of pollution that we will need to tackle. Hence, we note that the paper highlights addressing wastewater and nutrients pollution. The discussion on wastewater, therefore, should include ways to control and address discharges from industrial and commercial sources. Third, in addition to domestic sources of pollution, we're glad that the synthesis paper has identified transboundary forms of pollution as a key area that we should also address. In this connection, we believe that it is important that UNEA 3 addresses both transboundary air and water pollution. Given the transboundary nature of such pollution, multilateral fora such as UNEA 3 has an important role to play in helping to draw focus and addressing these pollution issues. Finally, we would like to also highlight that one of the key ways to deal with pollution is to minimize the creation of pollution. This can be done through efforts to enhance sustainable consumption and production. Through greener production methods by the industry and more sustainable consumption patterns by consumers, this could help reduce the amount of pollution that will be generated. Therefore, it would be useful to include sustainable consumption and production in our discussions at UNEA 3 to some extent. This point should also be reflected in the next iteration of such a document. To conclude, we are happy to get this conversation started early on what we would like to expect from UNEA 3. We look forward to the Secretariat capturing all the points that have been discussed today. We also look forward to further engagements on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, very much. I would like to ask you to send your comments by email because the connection wasn't the best and we need to capture everything what you said. And also the colleagues who already had an intervention, if you have a written intervention, then send it to the Secretariat. Now, I give the floor to China.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I think the issue of the theme of UNEA 3 is very important, and also we think it's not so difficult the issue since we already discussed since last December we had many discussion. I think we almost agree on something, but later until now it's become more discussion. Still we don't realize it's a difficult issue, but it's become a little bit complex. So, you know, at the beginning we have 3 proposal options, and then come to 6, now it's 12, maybe next meeting 24, even 48. But I think first we agree with the US. First we really think we should make it on non-objection base. Another thing we would like is to be shorter, simpler, or even without subtitle. To be more practical, I think among these 12, you know, we think most of us are very flexible. As you said, we are flexible to most of the topics, but not all, like some conclusive issue like the deal and the plan. It will be difficult for us to accept. For at this moment, we think except number 10, number 11, the other 10 options are flexible to us. And also we already proposed our recommendation. Number 1 is time to clean our planet, reversing the curve on pollution. Of course, we are still flexible for other 9 But anyhow, I really would like to draw attention of everyone. We should make this thing simple, easy, and not to be so complex. Thank you so much.
Thank you, China. So you said 10 and 11 no. Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Now I give the floor to Norway.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think on the issue of title, I think the US has made a good proposal here, because many of us have spent many hours of our lives negotiating 5 words, and I think there is a potential to do that with the title. So getting feedback, comments, principles from countries now will give some helpful indication for the Secretariat, for the Bureau, so that we rather use that means to agree on title. We agree, I can't remember whether it was EU or Switzerland who said, let's make it catchy so that it is translatable into all UN languages in a good, easy way. That's pretty much where Norway's criteria on the title extends. When it comes to priority areas, pollution, and this was part of what came up when we discussed the theme, of course, pollution is huge and can be everything, and there are even new emerging issues in pollution, I think, which came up from the discussion earlier today, which could be of interest. So perhaps it might be helpful, since we all agree that we need to be action-orientated, that we actually identify those areas where there is action we can take. Because we can discuss everything, but if we are choosing priority areas just on the basis of where countries would like political attention, that is entirely legitimate, but the reality is we would all have issues that we want to put particular attention on. So if we can identify where real concrete action that is going to be possible for all countries, because there will be some issues which are going to be more difficult than others, but where we can take some concrete action, that might help us to identify the priority areas a little easier. To join what other countries have said, we think that waste is certainly a good area, because there is an SDG on it, but there hasn't been a lot of progress made in implementing that SDG. So we think that UNEA 3 can make a very positive contribution there. And there are other processes which might also be helpful. The global program of action against land-based sources of pollution in the marine area. I'm not giving the title correctly, but I'm trying to avoid the very simple abbreviation, which might not be meaningful to everybody. That might provide some opportunities, because the meeting will be taking place in October. We also have the report which the Secretariat is preparing on marine litter and microplastics. So there are some opportunities which might also help us identify tangible areas in that respect. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Colombia. Colombia, Madam.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I was getting a bit distracted. Okay, so in the case of thank you so much, for the proposed team, Colombia could be happy with the 7 or the 8, healthy environment for all, or towards a clean planet. We do consider that these 2 proposals, it's very it's adequate for the content and results that we maybe would like to expect as part of the UNEA. However, we want to also maybe put on the table another idea, striving for a clean planet, impacts, challenges, and solutions for pollution. We think this will also help us to address pollution through complementary teams, and also it would help us focus on, for example, some of the issues related to pollutions, like the impacts, and what are the challenges also that many of the countries are facing to combat this, and also the solutions, because I think that should be part of one of the main goals that we should strive for in this this UNEA to come with some concrete solutions to which the different countries could commit with for the next years. In regard to the priority areas that were highlighted, we think that we could just live with 4 of them: air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, and marine pollution, of course with the description that they have there. Because the other areas that we see here, maybe they are more linked to source of pollution, and we think that that talking about the pollution in the different part of the environment could be set as our priority areas, and then within these we can talk about the different sources of pollution. Inputs on how to approach the team and potential outcomes. We are agree with the majority of what the document have expressed. In regard to the challenges and adverse effects on transboundary forms of pollution, we think that maybe we can strengthen more that part, because definitely looking at the problem on a large scope, we think that we really, as countries, we can address also collective global efforts to combat pollution, even pollution that maybe it's not generated in our frontiers, but we receive it from others. Also, in regard to the triple COP that is going to take place in Geneva, rather than taking in account the theme, we think that is key to keep in mind the results, which can be also can be useful as inputs to develop the resolutions and outcomes of the UNEA 2. And finally, we think that we have to narrow down on what we would like to achieve at the end of UNEA. We consider that we should aim for a reasonable number of resolutions in order to avoid overloading. I'm almost finishing now. The negotiations capacity, and that at the end, these resolutions, whatever proposals arose during these next months, that they can really mean practical and concrete proposals that can be easily materialized in every level of government and society. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. Please keep these thoughts about the outcome, the resolutions, for the next discussion also, okay? Because today we are just the team and the priority areas. I will give the floor to Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the proposed titles, Mexico does not have any specific choice for the ones that have been proposed. However, we believe that the title should be short enough and action-oriented. The action-oriented part, to be able to develop into this global action plan, and also to be able to feed into what we will be bringing to the high-level political forum. Once we have an overarching theme that can cover both, it'll be easier for us in our debates and for our ministers to bring forward something that's achievable. Regarding the priority areas, we believe that the ones that have been stated are good enough. We believe that besides the air, water, land, and marine pollution areas, the sound management of chemicals and waste are key in this aspect. And once we have the overarching theme, then each delegation can focus on one of these for the resolutions that will be proposed. So we believe in something that is comprehensive and action-oriented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. I give the floor to Iraq.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, colleagues. Regarding the proposed wording on the theme, my delegation agree with the chair that the title need to be simple and short. We are flexible with the 12 options, but we are not in favor of number 10 for the Global Action Plan. Regarding priority areas, we think sand and dust storms are important to be there. Also, maybe we can tackle the conflict areas, pollution in the conflict areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Iraq. I have only one person to intervene. That's my colleague from Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam. Well, you see, the issue basically is that countries have obviously proposed these themes after some consultative process, locally and with the capitals. And now we can continue to debate the issue, but then the thing is that we need to come up with something as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it will be decided by another bureau that we are sometimes, resentful of. So what I would propose is, I have a concrete proposal, because right now we have to move beyond generalities. So our proposal would be to simply say countering pollution. Okay? Countering pollution or combating pollution or whatever military term that you like. Basically, the idea being, pollution free is kind of a common thread running, through the things. Then one or two themes are a bit specific: global action plan, time to clean up, on which, there may be, some misgivings. So essentially countering pollution. And then you can put in whatever sub-themes or whatever, and get on with it. Because the more, if we try to squeeze in everything or to delete, because frankly it's very difficult, for us as delegations to say that, okay, I'll go with that, and while I concede whatever I have. So basically it's not the best thing to do, but maybe the lowest common denominator is the answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Botswana and Uganda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And in addition to what I highlighted earlier, I just want to indicate that under priority areas for African group, air pollution, water pollution, land pollution, and e-waste are of crucial importance to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. Uganda?
Thank you, Chair. I think, Chair, the decision on how we shall proceed lies with you, but I think the High Commission of Pakistan has complicated issues, because whenever a proposal comes up, we have to go back to our capitals. So the quick solution can't be got right now, because we have already consulted on the other proposals. It would make life easier if really we confined it to that, but every country has its own right to make proposals, and which we shall not oppose. But Chair, I will have something else to, under A or B. I don't know whether we want me to say it now.
That's later on, please. Let's finish this topic, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? No member states. I have a request online from the representative of major groups Pure Earth, Lucy Concordel. Madam, if you could be very short and brief in your intervention. Can you hear us?
Yes, hello, Madam Chair.
Please go.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you for including the civil society into this discussion On behalf of Pure Earth and the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution and our 40+ members, we would like to add just a few points. Well, first of all, we haven't heard much about the human health in this discussion, and we believe that it is critical that this remain a key focus, as pollution in all its forms is the leading cause of death globally, responsible for causing 9 million deaths in 2015, or 1 in 6 deaths. Health is also a sector which typically receives more attention and resources, so highlighting this is crucial to enabling solutions and capacity building in LMICs to address their pollution problems. We were very pleased to hear that the Environment Life program includes efforts related to linking relevant ministries or governments to statistic offices. We believe this is very pertinent, and it will help, of course, get more relevant data by country. We would urge UNEA 3 to focus on tackling pollution problems in terms of where the most impact or return for public health can be made. So this will probably require a country-by-country approach to prioritize pollution problems and their solutions. We are actually piloting this approach at GAP with a number of LMICs, or low and middle-income countries, and we hope to have lessons to share soon. This is also a key recommendation which we have included in the Global Commission on Health and Pollution.
Have you finished?
Just a second. We are also pleased to see the focus on solutions. As the representative of Norway mentioned, pollution is huge, and even new emerging issues should be taken into account. We should be action-oriented, especially where there are actions we can take.
Okay, Madam.
One last point, if I may.
Yes, but it's about the topic, the wording of the team, and the priority areas, no outcome.
Okay. Well, then that's it then. Thank you very much.
Then we are waiting for your intervention next time, okay?
Okay.
On the outcome. Thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, one very, very, very brief intervention from Pakistan.
Very brief can just be like this, but I have to say a little more.
He has to offer us lunch.
Yes. I'll give you some toxic lunch. Okay, not to basically, in empathy for my Ugandan colleague, the idea is basically not to complicate, the idea is to reach a solution. And so I have a fallback arrangement, maybe, which you can take back to your capital. Since pollution-free planet is a recurrent theme in that, so I would just propose that we can even go with, let's say, pollution-free planet, if it's agreeable to the others. Because I've just taken a cue from what the chair said, that the idea is to have a simple theme, and then we can, express other priorities like the one we recently heard from the civil society about health and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very, very much for all the contributions. I have a proposal to make it simple and more practical and efficient, if you would like. We heard opinions, we have written comments, and please send us all your comments in written form today to the Secretariat to be uploaded on the website. My proposal is the following. Having heard opinions on the wording of the team and priority areas, as well as the scientific, if you wish, scientific data from regional assessment, my proposal is that if you allow us as a bureau to work on very concrete proposal to put on your table next time to simplify the matters. All regional and all regional groups are represented in the bureau. So if you allow us to work on everything what you said and to have a very concise short title and come with a limited number of proposals, not 12, and to also on priority areas for the next our next meeting. Of course, this will be shared before the next meeting with you to collect your input from the capitals. And you can also have possibility to discuss it in the regional and political groups, if that is okay with you. If the other issue is that we have 12, and I think the Secretariat is really right, it's not title, it's actually there, we have slogans here. And actually we can think even to have a slogan for the next session, but I'm not opening the floor for discussions on this. So we exhausted this. I again very, very much thank you for all your input and your presence here. We have another last point to discuss, AOBs. Any other matters? I understand that Uganda has something to share with us.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the Global Action Plan, our thinking is that it would make our work easier if there was some more clarification on the concept of Global Action Plan. I actually see it in the synthesis paper, but the synthesis paper is still very mean on allowing us to understand what is being proposed. So before 16th, I propose that we get some, I don't know whether there is a specific group or country that proposed the Global Action Plan, or if it is the Secretariat which developed the concept, then we need some more clarification on what we intend to do. And I think it might be also tying up with the Bureau's decision on the theme and sub-themes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the action plan, it was first proposed by Singapore and also by the EU. And it's not the topic, or it wasn't the topic of this meeting because it's not really clear for any of us what exactly we would like to see as a global action plan. We will think about it with the Secretariat to see how we can offer more information and probably from member states or group of states that proposed the action plan, which is Singapore and EU, for the next meeting. Norway, any other matter?
Actually, no, ma'am, just a question of clarification, if I may. It's no need to be so worried about what I'm going to say. A question of clarification to your proposal. Are you suggesting that the Bureau proposes a title as well as priority plan, or just title to start off with?
Both.
Sorry, priority areas.
I said both, and I'm not worried, ever. Okay, if anybody else, nobody else, any intervention? Oh, EU, please.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Just a quick remark. On the Global Action Plan on pollution, I would refer to UN Environment that the proposal originally came from the scientific background for that. It wasn't proposed by us. Thank you.
Okay, US.
Thank you, Chair. And now I have you worried. So being that there's limited support on the Global Action Plan, I don't think it's fair to put the work back on the Secretariat's table to kind of define what it is we mean by this Global Action Plan. I am completely unclear what it means. I don't think there's any consensus on what a Global Action Plan is. Maybe we can consider related items down the road, but for the practice of getting further down here towards a document we can agree on, maybe we can just agree to strike the Global Action Plan language and the deal language from the titles going forward.
Okay, thank you. So if nothing else, thank you again for your presence and contributions, and see you on the 16th. Have a good day.
you.